Remember that one time when the Mona Lisa was stolen and remained missing for years? No? Well, take a seat and let me tell you all about it. This story starts in the famous city of Paris, a city with many iconic sites, many of which you definitely would have heard of, like the Eiffel Tower. It's also a city where you can see some pretty strange things, so it's entirely possible that the first scene in this story didn't look too out of place. It's an early August morning in 1911. A department store employee is opening up shop, ready for the busy week ahead. He spots a short, stout man running barefoot, holding what looked to be a panel under his arm covered in a white blanket. As he's running, he tosses a small, shiny object off to the side of the road. The employee walks over and looks at the shiny object. It's a doorknob. He stops and thinks to himself that this was the strangest thing he'd seen all day, even if it was still only 7:30 in the morning. There could be all kinds of explanations for what the department store employee witnessed. Sunday night in Paris was typically a big party night, and it wasn't uncommon for people to be carrying around doorknobs after a big night out in the town. I made up that last sentence, but you get my point. People have carried much worse after a night out drinking. As it turns out, the store employee had just witnessed the final part of what would become the world's most famous robbery. The doorknob wasn't some high-tech James Bond-like device. It wasn't used as a weapon. It wasn't even a well-rehearsed distraction. It actually came from an inside door on a small staircase at the Louvre Museum. The door leads into a small courtyard, which leads onto the street just opposite of where the department store employee worked. That door now lay open, minus a doorknob, and a short distance away was a man making a quick getaway. And the thing he was carrying, wrapped in the white blanket? The stolen Mona Lisa. Nowadays, the Mona Lisa lies well protected at the Louvre Museum in Paris. It sits in a protective case that could quite possibly survive the end of the world. It's heat-proof, waterproof, and even earthquake-proof. In front of it lies some protective, bulletproof glass for good measure. Spectators have to admire the small painting from afar, as between them and the painting is a wooden fence. If anyone was to get past that fence, they'd be met by a dozen armed guards. But the Mona Lisa wasn't always this protected. In the early 20th century, the Louvre had plenty of problems with security. They had no alarms. Paintings were sometimes vandalized, while artwork and sculptures were stolen every so often. Because of the poor security, the museum had gotten a lot of bad press, and so they decided to improve things. They hired some workers to put glass cases around some of their more famous artworks. One of the people they hired was an Italian amateur painter named Vincenzo Peruggia. He had left Italy with a dream of making a living selling his artwork, although that wasn't working out well for him. To make ends meet, he worked as a handyman, and one of his jobs as a handyman landed him right in the Louvre. He found himself with the task of cleaning the paintings and putting them into new glass cases. This hands-on job gave him a good sense of the collection of artwork at the Louvre, and he noticed something. A lot of the artwork was from Italy, artwork that had been looted by Napoleon around 100 years earlier during his Italian campaign. While doing the repetitive job of cleaning and measuring paintings, Peruggia began to develop an idea, a patriotic one. His plan was to steal an Italian piece of art from the Louvre and return it to Italy. He just didn't know which piece he would take. Not yet anyway. As the days go by, he gives this idea more and more thought. Eventually, he even begins to plan it. The heist itself was actually quite simple. Peruggia's plan was to stay behind after his shift, hiding somewhere, maybe in a storage room or a cubicle in the toilet. He'd stay there until the guards stopped patrolling. Then, he'd take a painting during the late hours of the night and finally make his escape during the early hours of the morning. And so, on the evening of August 11th, 1911, Peruggia took his opportunity. While wearing his work uniform, he stays back in the Louvre after closing hours, hiding inside of a broom cupboard. He stays there for some time, waiting until the early hours of the morning. At some point, he decides that the painting he's going to take will be the Mona Lisa. When he hears the footsteps of the night shift guard fade away, he exits the broom cupboard and quickly gets to work removing the painting. He makes quick work of it. He'd removed paintings off the walls at the Louvre many times before. After taking down the Mona Lisa, he covers it with a white blanket, places it under his arm, and quickly disappears down a service stairwell. At the bottom of the stairs was a door, which leads into a courtyard and then onto the street. Peruggia's escape was almost complete. But when he turns the doorknob, it won't open. The door's locked. He stays calm and takes out his tools to try and unlock the door. No luck. He tries and tries, but still, the door remains shut. He decides to unscrew the doorknob. Hastily, he takes it off and tries to open the door again. Still, no luck. By now, Peruggia is panicking, and as he thinks things couldn't get any worse, they do. He hears footsteps coming down the staircase while he's standing right in front of the door, with a doorknob in his hand and one of the most famous paintings in the world in his possession. The footsteps get closer and closer until it's the night shift guard. He's surprised, but only because he's caught off guard. Excuse the pun. It wasn't uncommon for workers at the Louvre to work at night. That way they wouldn't disrupt business during the day. The guard unlocks a nearby door and lets Peruggia out. Out into the courtyard, which Peruggia walks across towards the exit that leads onto the street. By now, the sun is out and businesses are beginning to open. Peruggia was now out onto the street, where he tosses the doorknob onto the floor before disappearing into the early Paris morning. One of the most famous heists in history was complete, and all that was left behind was a door without a doorknob and an empty wall space at the Louvre, where the Mona Lisa hung only hours ago. At first, no one realizes that the Mona Lisa is missing. Workers at the Louvre made a note of the missing painting, but they didn't think it was stolen. They noted that the painting had been moved, which wasn't unusual. Paintings were moved around all the time, especially lately while they were being put into glass cases. But as morning turns to noon and noon turns to evening, it becomes apparent that the painting is missing. Local newspapers get wind of the theft the next day, on August 22nd, and crowds begin to gather outside the Louvre. This attention forces the head of the museum to make a statement, and so, on the very same day that the crowds gathered, they tell the world that the Mona Lisa has been stolen, and that they have no idea who stole it. The theft gets a lot of international press, and the ordeal is a huge embarrassment for the French government. They make it a priority to solve the mystery as quickly as possible. Investigators question everyone, from guards and staff at the Louvre to workers in nearby shops. Vincenzo Peruggia himself is questioned twice, although they do it merely to ask if he saw anything unusual. At this point, he wasn't a suspect. Investigators even arrest a certain someone you may have heard of, Pablo Picasso. Picasso had been involved in robberies at the Louvre before, stealing 2 Iberian statues a few years ago. After questioning him, they let him go. The theft has an unexpected outcome. People are now lining up to enter the Louvre, to see the empty space which the Mona Lisa occupied only a few days before. Some people even leave flowers, as if at a funeral. Stories and theories circulate in newspapers all around the world for over a year, without any breakthroughs in the case. The Mona Lisa, which once hung on the wall of Napoleon's bedroom, was now hidden in Vincenzo Peruggia's bedroom, under his bed, in his apartment in Paris. Vincenzo Peruggia realizes he now needs to plan a way of getting the Mona Lisa back to Italy. He dreams of the day that he finally returns the Mona Lisa to its home country, receiving a hero's welcome. And so, on November of 1913, over 2 years after he stole the painting, he travels to Florence to meet an Italian art dealer named Alfredo Geri. He walks into Geri's office and presents himself as Vincenzo Leonard. He tells him he has the Mona Lisa, which he's brought back to its rightful home in Italy. For the artwork, he asks for 500,000 lira and a promise that the Mona Lisa would remain in Italy. At first, Geri dismisses the man, thinking it's a prank. But eventually, skepticism turns to intrigue, and so he makes arrangements to see the painting in the stranger's hotel room. Later that day, in the hotel, Jerry watches as Peruggia pulls out a small trunk, which he places on the bed. He begins to empty out its contents: a torn shoe, some painting supplies, and a mandolin. When he gets to the bottom, he opens up a small hidden compartment. He reaches down, and out of that compartment he pulls out a small object wrapped in red silk. He lays it on the bed, where he slowly removes the red silk. Jerry's eyes open wide. He's both shocked and excited. He would later recall, to our astonished eyes, the divine Gioconda appeared, intact and wonderfully preserved. Gioconda is the Italian name for Mona Lisa. The next few hours are spent verifying the Mona Lisa. Experts from the Uffizi Gallery in Florence examine the artwork from top to bottom, slowly going over every inch of canvas. In the meantime, Vincenzo Peruggia agrees to wait in the hotel room. Hours later, the experts confirm that what lay before them was indeed the Mona Lisa. After 2 long years filled with false leads and dead-end trails, the Mona Lisa had finally been found. While it was a happy ending to the tale of the missing Mona Lisa, Vincenzo Peruggia didn't quite have the fairytale homecoming he had dreamed of. Police entered his hotel room, where they quietly and peacefully arrested him. The Mona Lisa would return to the Louvre a few months later, but not before going on a tour through the major cities of her homeland. On the first day on display in Italy, 30,000 people turned up to see the painting. Italian newspapers report on the crowds. And despite sitting in a jail cell awaiting trial, Peruggia kind of gets his wish. They portray him as a sort of hero, a man who they say rescued the kidnapped Mona Lisa and brought her back to her homeland of Italy. 6 months after his arrest, Peruggia stands before a judge to be sentenced. He gets a light sentence, only 7 months. After his release, he's hailed by some newspapers as an Italian Robin Hood. In the years after the theft, the Mona Lisa takes the undisputed title for the most famous piece of artwork in the world. The theft itself, and the media coverage as a result of the theft, helped propel the Mona Lisa to levels of fame that no other painting in the world can match. If you like these sorts of videos and you've got 5 seconds to spare, hit the like and subscribe button. It really does help us out. Thanks.